The Imperial Japanese Mission, 1917, a record of the reception throughout the United States of the special mission headed by Viscount Ishii. And when the Imperial Japanese Mission was in New York City, they had a dinner, and some pretty famous people spoke at this dinner. One of them was John Dewey. John Dewey is the father of our failing, disastrous public education system. Here's what he said. Listen very carefully. John Dewey, professor of philosophy in Columbia University, who was the next speaker, was listened to with great intentness. He said, quote, "Someone remarked that the best way to unite all the nations on this globe would be an attack from some other planet. In the face of such an alien enemy, people would respond with a sense of their unity of interest and purpose." Unquote. Now, bear in mind, folks, that's 1917. One of the next documents that I found, and I found quite a few, but one that's pretty important is called a report from Iron Mountain, the probability and desirability of permanent peace. Now, I encourage you to find this book, wherever you can find it. I don't know where you can get it, but find it. Page 66. Credibility, in fact, lies at the heart of the problem of developing a political substitute for war. This is where the space race proposals, in many ways so well suited as economic substitutes for war, fall short. The most ambitious and unrealistic space project cannot of itself generate a believable external menace. It has been hotly argued that such a menace would offer the last best hope of peace, etc., by uniting mankind against the danger of destruction by creatures from other planets or from outer space. Experiments have been proposed to test the credibility of an out-of-our-world invasion threat. And it continues on another page. Nevertheless, an effective political substitute for war would require alternate enemies, some of which might seem equally far-fetched in the context of the current war system. It may be, for instance, that gross pollution of the environment can eventually replace the possibility of mass destruction by nuclear weapons as the principal substitute for war. Are you beginning to get the message, folks? These things were planned many, many years ago. All the bombardment of the public with movies about flying saucers in the 50s, right after the United Nations Treaty was signed and the UN Participation Act was pushed through Congress, and all of the incidents since that have convinced the majority of the American people that flying saucers are real and extraterrestrials exist, and that flying saucers are from an extraterrestrial origin. During the Reagan administration, he made 6 speeches, specifically talked about a threat from outer space by some other species from some other planet. 6, ladies and gentlemen. Why would the president repeat the same thing 6 times, tagged on to the ends of speeches by him? The speechwriters did not put that in the speech. Ronald Reagan added it himself.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. I couldn't help at one point in my discussions privately with General Secretary Gorbachev, when you stop to think that we're all God's children wherever we may live in the world, I couldn't help but say to him, just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet, outside in the universe. We'd forget all of the local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on this earth together.
Even that does not describe why the world has changed so much and why the world has turned so much toward a new world order and a new kind of civilization.
This was a powerful suggestion to implant into the minds of the people of the world that there really is a threat from some other species from some other planet to this Earth. I have since come to believe that the extraterrestrial portion of all of this is nonsense, but that the technology is real. I believe that many of us were shown these documents over the years so that later we would talk about it. I mean, how can you keep the existence of extraterrestrials, if they were real, a secret? And how could anyone keep quiet knowing that they had seen documentation, official government documents labeled top secret, that expressed that these extraterrestrials were real and had visited this Earth?
But the Allies did capture one man who knew all about this place, and he wasn't a token find. His name was SS General Jakob Sporenberg, and he was in charge of the technical program at the mine. What he revealed astonished his interrogators. Indeed, I find it astonishing 60 years later. He spoke of a secret experiment attempting nothing less than to conquer gravity. He described a bell-shaped device that needed enormous amounts of electrical power. It was made of a hard, heavy metal and filled with a mercury-like substance that was violet in color and glowed when under test. People who worked on the bell suffered from sleep problems and severe vertigo. 5 of the 7 scientists died while working on the project. In a memo to Hitler, the scientists wrote, "It is in our opinion that the scientific results ascertained from our experiments with the bell are truly decisive for the war. What I do know is that many of these bizarre projects like the bell did not remain in German hands. At the end of the war, they were plundered secretly by the American High Command and taken to the States." The speculation about Foo Fighters was about to be overshadowed by one of the most sensational UFO sightings of all, the 1947 incident at Roswell in New Mexico.
The real UFOs begins in Nazi Germany. As victory in the Second World War was slipping from their grasp, German scientists were trying to perfect weapons that might turn the war in Hitler's favor. One of these was Victor Schauberger, an inventor who had produced models for a flying saucer. It had met the promise of a flying machine that could maneuver like a helicopter, but travel at supersonic speed undetected by the enemy. Schauberger's craft utilized a tornado-like vortex, which produced magnetic effects causing levitation.
Victor was recognized by the German government, actually met with Hitler, and later was inducted into the SS and put to work further developing this flying saucer concept.
He worked alongside a group of brilliant German engineers, including Rudolf Schriever, Andreas Epp, and Dr. Richard Miete. All produced highly advanced designs.
The Germans actually had 3 separate developmental areas for flying saucers, one at Peenemünde, one at Breslau, and the other at Prague. at all these three facilities, flying saucers flew.
The Germans had, in fact, gone far enough into development and testing that aircraft were in the air. And one company, Messerschmitt, had flown a complete saucer-shaped aircraft.
These pictures of the early prototypes resemble photographs of UFOs that would emerge in the coming decades. But this was not the world of science fiction. These were highly advanced UFOs. For the German military, this lethal weaponry was being developed to win the war. At their deadly weapons research facilities, scientists were working on a new generation of weapons. And alongside the rockets and missiles, real UFOs were a crucial part of that program.
One of the incredible things that happened during the Second World War was the amount of technology that German scientists were turning out that was devoted to a war effort. And that included rocketry, it included the jet engines, but it also included some remarkable work in terms of flying saucer craft.
But time was running out for Hitler and his scientists. On all fronts, the Allies were breaking through. The Germans were in retreat. The flying saucer technology, just like all of Hitler's other ultimate weapons, would come too late.
Even right to the very end of the war, it seems they really believed that these super weapons, these super delivery systems, were going to be able to at least stall the Allies and they were going to be able to arrive at some sort of political settlement of the war.
Hitler's dream of winning the war with his super weapons never came. By May 1945, the final battle for Berlin had started. The war in Europe was virtually over.
On the morning of May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered, effectively ending World War II in Europe. During the war, Germany had developed many advanced technologies, including the V-1 flying bomb, the V-2 rocket, and the Messerschmitt 262 jet fighter. These advancements were kept highly secret, but now that Germany had fallen, they were up for grabs. Germany had already been split into 3 zones of post-war control during the Yalta Conference a couple months before the war ended. This meant that American, English, and Soviet intelligence teams were racing to retrieve as much precious equipment as they could before the division took place. Though America was trying to recover equipment and weapons, the most important of all were the Nazi scientists. The Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JIOA for short, was directly responsible for Operation Paperclip, a campaign to get these scientists away from the Soviets so they could work for us in the looming Cold War. However, in order to gain the upper hand, war criminals were never tried, but instead swiftly integrated into the newly formed military-industrial complex. And some of these scientists were even tried and found guilty, but were still brought to the U.S. By accepting these people into the country, the United States government willingly chose a policy of technology over justice. In June of 1944, the Allied forces commenced an attack on German-occupied France. As American troops pushed back the German lines, small groups of intelligence officers, known as T-forces, followed. The T-forces' objective was to gather up German technology, research materials, and technicians, and bring them back for evaluation. It soon became apparent, however, that in order to completely understand this new technology, the brains that developed it would be needed as well. But the president, not wanting war criminals working in the U.S., flatly refused to sign any papers that would allow such operations. Fearing that without these scientists, the U.S. would be fatally crippled in the upcoming conflict with Russia, the Joint Chiefs of Staff overlooked FDR's refusal, and Operation Overcast was underway. This might have eventually become a problem had it not been for FDR's death on April 12, 1945. Truman was now in control of the White House, and, taken completely by surprise, and not having been briefed about the growing problems with Soviet Russia during his few weeks as vice president, was in no position to seize the reins of government. The Joint Chiefs of Staff decided to ask the newly appointed President Truman to expand Operation Overcast. He consented, and in August 1945, President Truman authorized Operation Paperclip. The Joint Intelligence Committee, which was the intelligence branch for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, set up its own subcommittee, the JIOA, created for the sole purpose of directing Operation Paperclip, with the exploitation branch under Army Intelligence of the War Department General Staff in charge of the physical execution of the project. Through this tangled web of sister agencies and subcommittees, the government was able to effectively hide, twist, and erase many parts of these Nazi scientists' pasts. So, though President Truman had expressed his concerns of having Nazis work in the US, much as President Roosevelt did, there was no way he would be able to verify anything these agencies did. The hunt for Nazi scientists now had official sanction. In all, 1,600 Nazi scientists were brought to the US. Each of the scientists had something to contribute to their respective fields. But how does one weigh the benefits? These people were once Nazis, which must somehow have carried over to their work later on in life. Some of them were even convicted war criminals.
System development, we really can't talk about.
But the Morrises did talk in general about secret military experiments with lifelike 3D projections in the sky called holograms.
Holograms on a battlefield would be to divert the attention of the enemy, to deliver propaganda or something very frightening to make the enemy run away if you think that he will believe that what you're sending is really an angel, a devil, a UFO.
And where could this type of weaponry be tested? Perhaps not coincidentally, along the US-Mexico border at the Army's electronic proving ground in Fort Huachuca, Arizona.
Keep in mind that test facilities like Fort Huachuca in Arizona are electrical optical test beds, and part of what they're testing are the effects of these electro-optical devices on a target population.
And the target population may be us.
America has to test American equipment in America.
Met zijn schijnwerpers het publiek in het Colosseum verlicht.
Now, you people out there have been ignoring the UFO phenomenon for too long. It has all the earmarks of the most successful, most sophisticated mind control operation in the history of the world, and you are ignoring it. What better way to implement a plan to bring about a one-world government than to create the possibility in the minds of the people of the world that we are being threatened from some other species, from some other planet, and do it in a way that if anybody questions it or challenged it or wants to talk about it publicly, that they are ridiculed.
and the ultimate goal is to make the Earth look very small, to present the people of the world with an external threat to this Earth, a superior race from some other planet, vastly superior to us in intellect, philosophy, and technology, in order to cause the dissolution of nation-states, the dissolution of all existing religions, and the formation of the world totalitarian socialist government.
This is being promulgated in many ways, by television commercials, in the movies, in the newspapers, by creating incidents either real or imagined. I believe, because of my research, and because of the extensive documentation that I've found and that is in my book, that this whole scenario has been created to give us an artificial alien threat from outer space.